Bees are working every day for all of us, even though bees have been working for humans for thousands of years. This relationship may be coming to an end. There are fewer bees, and that's bad news for humans. What would the world look like if bees disappeared? It's hard to say about the whole world, but it's easy to imagine a post-bee supermarket. There would be few products, and honey would be far from the most valuable thing we would lose. Long before bees contacted humans, they had other friends. The oldest known bee remains are about 100 million years old. It turns out that bees lived alongside dinosaurs for at least 35 million years. I'm not sure if dinosaurs built hives or worked in an apiary, but it's quite likely they didn't mind eating honey, wax, or brood, much like some modern birds. However, this story is not about dinosaurs, but about humans. The only parasite to which so far bees have unfortunately failed to develop any response is man. If the bees disappear but humanity remains, live 4 years. To understand why we won't last long without bees, we need to study the history of our species' interactions, to learn what bees should be valued for, what threatens them, and how to save them. In fact, all parts of the burger come from the bees. This sounds like another myth, but it's true. It's all about the fact that bees are the #1 pollinators in the world. Although the grains for buns are pollinated by the wind, key ingredients like butter and sugar depend on bees. These insects pollinate the sugar beets and sunflowers needed to produce sugar and oil. Bees make an important contribution by pollinating forage crops like clover and alfalfa, which are staple foods for livestock. This increases the availability and quality of meat for cutlets. Cheese. Here, bees also have an impact on production by pollinating plants that serve as fodder for cows. The health and nutrition of the cows directly affects the quality and quantity of milk produced for cheese. Vegetables. Lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers. Bees are actively involved in pollinating these crops, ensuring their growth and development, making them affordable and delicious to add to burgers. Ketchup and mustard. These sauces are also indebted to bees. Pollination of tomato and mustard plants by bees contributes to the production of these popular condiments. These bold travelers know no bounds. Warm, scrubbed, and recessed wall cavities are ideal places to create nests. As one unlucky homeowner found out, he hired a pest control company after noticing bees crawling into the exterior wall of his home. But despite his best efforts, the clever insects managed to survive. That's when the man turned to Tennessee bee charmer David Glover. Glover first checked how big the hidden hive was with a thermal imaging camera. When he saw the results, he was greatly surprised at the large size of the heat signature. There was no other way to get to the hive, so he began smoking out the entrances and then began pulling out one brick at a time. He slowly worked his way down until the entire colony was visible in the hive, which was 1 meter wide and 1.5 meters high. It took Glover over 4 hours to safely separate all the honeycombs. He squeezed as many as 35,000 bees, but eventually the hive was able to be pulled out and moved. If you find yourself in Tennessee and have a bee problem, contact Glover. But there are so many hypotheses and evidence about the evolution of man and the honeybee. First of all, it is known that man has a large brain is a sweet tooth. He consumed pure glucose before the advent of sugar. The main source of glucose was bee honey. The evolution of the brain, it is not conceivable without the consumption of honey. In fact, bees created man. We have always had a special relationship with bees. Humans and bees became friends over 10,000 years ago, at least in ancient Egypt. It is known from archaeological excavations and from the very same papyrus drawings that man began to domesticate or befriend bees about 10,000 years ago. One of the oldest proofs of the close connection between our species was found by archaeologists in a cave in South Africa. There, scientists found traces of beeswax 40,000 years old. Unknown hunters or huntresses used it to attach spearheads to spears. Much later, already in the 17th century, bees contributed to science with the first microscopes. Naturalists studied bees before many other creatures. But why did people pay attention to bees in the first place? Not just because they liked the stylish coloring of these insects. There is a theory that our love of fun and revelry is to blame. Honey was the basis of one of the first alcoholic drinks. In addition, people quite quickly realized that the products of bee production can be useful in medicine. More than 4,000 years ago, our ancestors already used honey as a medicine. And about 2,300 years ago, Aristotle called honey a good remedy for wounds and eye inflammation. Modern scientists generally agree with Aristotle. For example, one Australian variety of honey is effective against superbacteria, such as Staphylococcus aureus. Love is to ignore gravity. Bees sense the Earth's magnetic field and rely on it to find their way home and build honeycombs, but they don't really need gravity. Astronauts conducted experiments with bees aboard the shuttle, proving that that is, bees' ability to reproduce and create honeycombs was not affected by weightlessness. Bees cannot talk, but they nevertheless understand their hive mates very well. Bees communicate using special chemicals called pheromones. They sense them through their antennae. When a queen bee wants a snack, she emits pheromones, as befits a queen, to summon worker bees. But the range of the pheromones is limited, so bees that happen to be nearby conventionally pass them along the chain from one to the other. Hopefully, the essence of the message is not lost in this deaf phone, and the uterus will eventually get the feed it deserves. Bees can dance. Well, certainly not a prima donna from a big theater. The bee's dance language has been deciphered, and we know what it means. In 1973, Carl von Frisch and other scientists won the Nobel Prize for uncovering the intelligence of bees and the language of bees. The bee dances in a special way. It flies sometimes 2 kilometers away and finds a flowering field, comes back to the hive, sits on the wall, and begins to dance a figure 8. She sits down in a very special way. That is, the angle of her body corresponds to the angle of the direction to the sun. At the same time, she makes a correction for the movement of the sun, because it is clear that while she flew 2 kilometers there, while she returned, the sun has shifted a little bit, and she passes this displacement to her relatives, and the relatives then also make a correction when they fly, because they also do not immediately fly away, and the sun again shifts, and she's wiggling her belly, making wavy movements. And the more of these movements, the further the distance. And recently, British scientists decoded nearly 3,000 bee dances in hives in London and nearby rural areas. Some bees have the uncanny ability to age in reverse. When there are not enough young worker bee guzzlers, older bees can regain the energy of their youth and take up their work with enthusiasm. They even live longer than normal to keep the hive functioning. An active and longevity program in action. Scientists hope that this phenomenon will help to better understand the mechanism of aging in humans and perhaps find a way to combat senile dementia. Love is remembering each other's faces. In a past issue, we warned that pigeons never forget faces. Bees have decided to keep up. They're doing well in spamming too. Scientists noticed that bees remembered and recognized the faces of people who fed them sweet water. This skill is needed not only to navigate beekeepers, but also to return to flowers that produce more nectar. There are about 1 million neurons in a bee's brain. That sounds impressive, but compared to other species, it's small. For example, the mouse brain has about 75 million neurons, and humans have 100 billion neurons. Nevertheless, even with such modest data, the bee brain is able to perform many complex tasks such as adding and subtracting numbers. In addition, bees are able to understand the concept of zero.